You know, not that we want to let Zwift completely off the hook here, but maybe you let them off the hook just a little bit. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Sarah and I make videos about health and fitness and all of those things, endurance sports. So if that's your jam, go on down there, buttons, stuff, bells, things, you know, subscribe and all that good stuff. You can come on back for more. Sometimes I make stuff that's interesting and useful. I mean, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? Buttons. Thanks for coming. But today's video is a bit of an exciting one. Well, maybe not the video itself, but the news I have to share with you guys is going to be exciting for a lot of you. Those of you who have been struggling with some problems during events, right? During Tour de Zwift events or the big holiday events where you're seeing your system crash out at the beginning or at the end of a ride, or riders disappearing for an inordinate amount of time, or dropped frame rates, or some kind of lag and difficulty. And you're trying to understand what the hell is wrong with the program that is not working. My system was working fine before, and now it's working like crap. It's got to be something wrong with Zwift. And I was going to come on here today. I was going to describe why it's not really a Zwift technical problem and it's more of an issue with your device just not being capable of handling the new load or new volume of riders that are joining Zwift each and every day, and how basically what Zwift is describing in their own system requirements page as a standard setup is going to work about 95% of the time, but during some of those big events we're going to have difficulties and some of the limitations that Zwift is having in terms of repairing that because of the age of the code. And I was going to come on here and I was, much to my own dismay, I was going to sit here and I was going to recommend Apple TV to a lot of you riders. An Apple TV, of all things. From the person who loathes Apple more than almost anybody else in the world, I was going to recommend an Apple product as a compromise to make sure that you have a good, stable experience with Zwift. I'm not knocking people who use Apple TV. It was just difficult for me to recommend it, but it was really the only solution I could think of that was not going to be inordinately costly, that wasn't going to make people turn their settings way down to be able to participate in these rides on Zwift, and that could keep people from leaving the platform because they were frustrated with all the troubleshooting and the calls to customer service and not understanding why the computer that their own website told us that we can buy and use. And then, right before I was making this video, I just happened to be scrolling on the companion app looking for a potential ride to sign up for. And right at the very top, I see an update. What's going on with the update? What do they have going on? Didn't they just do an update? So I go and read the release notes, and right at the very top, Zwift has come up with a solution to help lower and mid-range machines. This is fantastic because I didn't know if they were going to be able to do this with the existing code. But basically what they've done is found a way to scale and throttle performance specific to your machine's capability. The biggest argument that was being had was that, well, for Zwift to fix this, they were going to have to limit the way that the game operated for everybody to deal with the lowest common denominator of machines. And people like myself and a number of others didn't want to be insensitive to new riders. We definitely want to encourage more people to join the community, but hey, we're paying our monthly dues as well. We don't want to pay to move backwards in performance. We want more. We want better UIs. We want graphics that are improved. We don't want to have our experience diminished because we have new riders that Zwift has done a really poor job of stewarding into the platform that are struggling with some kind of machine woes and they're not understanding how the game works and why this is happening. But they've come up with a solution, and I want to explain what the solution is, why things might look a little bit different for you, and why some of you might be completely unaffected by this. And then I'll go through and I kind of explain why you were having troubles to begin with, how the game kind of works, so that you can understand why it happened, right? Most people want to know why. People are curious and they want to figure out why a game like Zwift, something that kind of is, 10 years old in terms of its graphical components, why it's bricking people's decent systems, right? Maybe they're not great, maybe not the high-end expensive systems, but they're not the $200 Walmart special either. The update today, if you want to read the notes, I'll post them here and then you can kind of check them out in the companion app, is what they've done during big events is they've actually further throttled the number of riders that a lower to mid-range machine can see. So currently, for the standard user, what happens is that Zwift limits the numbers of riders that you can see, that your computer is going to have to render, and I'll describe how that process works in a few minutes, to 100. So basically, you can only see 100 riders around you. And you'll notice that if you're kind of riding through a big group ride, and as you move forward, you'll see what used to be an empty space out in front of you all of a sudden start populating with more riders. It doesn't necessarily look like what you're seeing in terms of maybe your ranking or your position on the screen as more people start to appear. That was Zwift's stopgap to make sure that machines were not overloaded trying to render out too many riders. Well, unfortunately, what's happened with the new influx of riders, the 100 rider limit, which usually works, is not working because of the churn and the washing machine effect. And I'll go more into detail on that so that if you're curious and you want to understand that you will. But because of the refresh of those riders now, it is overloading machines. So what they've done is they've figured out a way to pull the signature from your device, from your graphics card, to know what its capabilities are, and it's scaling that. Now it's dropping back the number of riders that your particular machine is going to render out to make sure that your machine is not overwhelmed. Now, I don't know the specifics on how exactly that's going to work, if that's going to be a flexible number, if that's going to go from 50 to 75 back up to 100, if it's going to kind of scale throughout the game, or if it's going to put a hard limit on there. The notes do not specify that. I think we'll start to get more news as things go on, and some of the powers that be in the Zwift community will start to kind of test this stuff out and get feedback. But suffice it to say, you should not be enduring any more crashes because the game will not be feeding your system more than it is capable of. Now, it may diminish the experience a little bit in terms of seeing fewer riders than you saw before. It might not be as graphically appealing, and it's different, right? People are a little bit resistant to change, but it's going to be a much superior option to see fewer riders and have stability as it would be to see more riders and risk that, hey, I just finished a ride and it crashed out, it didn't save. Now I have to sit and email back and forth with Zwift and try to get credit for stage 4 of the Tour de Zwift and all of this nonsense, right? So it's a solution. It's an interim solution to a larger scale problem that I'm going to talk about. But it's going to work, which is really great because now you guys don't have to go buy something else. You guys don't have to troubleshoot. You don't have to invest in heavier duty equipment and a better graphics card or buy an Apple TV. You can deal with what you have as long as it meets the system requirements laid out by Zwift, and you're going to be able to use everything pretty much as designed. You're just going to see fewer riders. So it's exciting that Zwift finally figured out how to scale that per device. Now, I've not yet tested this out for myself. I'm going to be doing a ride here shortly, but when I reviewed the forum thread related to this update, Zwift has assured people in that thread that riders with machines that have been capable, gaming capable rigs, or machines that just kind of fall into this best category, that their experience will be unaffected. So if you are somebody who hasn't had a problem with Zwift thus far, your experience should be pretty much the same as it's always been. Now, if you want to know why this happened and why it's taken so long for Zwift to kind of figure out a solution, you've got to kind of understand how the game functions and the history behind it. First of all, for those of you who haven't been around that long, the Zwift code for the game is almost 10 years old. It might even be more than 10 years old at this point. This was a bootstrapped type of game that John Mayfield created basically in his garage, so to speak, for himself. And after a couple of years of playing with this and engaging some other folks and some of the other founders and Eric Min come together and say, hey, this is scalable. This is a great idea for a game. What can we do to make this kind of something that we can send out to the cycling community, right? And they put together a code structure based on John's original code, and in 2014 they released the beta version of Zwift. Now, I don't recall how long it was in beta. I was not a part of the beta group. But in 2015 they kind of turned the key and opened up beta to the public, and it was free at the time. I remember trying it out, and it was just this little 6 or 7 mile loop on Jarvis Island, and there really weren't very many people out there, but it was cool. I mean, Zwift is cool now, but it was cool in a different kind of way. Like, you have the sense that this was going to be something kind of cool later on down the line as they developed it. But I know I stepped away from it for a little while because it was the summertime here, and I don't ride indoors unless it's really foul weather in the summer because our summers are so short. We have 6 months maximum of outdoor riding time. But I forgot about Zwift, actually, and I came back to it later that year, and they had moved to a paid model, and I was like, such a short little course, and there was really nobody there. I mean, I don't know if it's worth paying for at this point. I think it was $10 a month at the time, but I went and I tried another free trial, right? I signed up again, and I tried out the game. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, this is different, right? They added more worlds, there was more graphics involved, you saw a few more riders. I think they had the Ghost Riders out there that early. Those of you who have been around for a while, you can correct me if I'm misremembering that, but they had definitely enhanced the game to something a lot more playable. So I was sold on it at that point. But I'm explaining that story because Zwift looks exactly the same now as it did then. Now we have more window dressings, right? We have more features. We have group rides and races and badges and challenges and missions and all of this stuff that was not available back then. The game was very simple. It was free ride at that time. But the actual graphics, short of some resolution increases that have come with technology changes from 2015 to 2021, the game is fundamentally the same. The graphics are fundamentally the same. So, using your basic or standard setups in order to run Zwift, I mean, a computer that's 5, 6, 7, 10 years old can run this game unto itself. It's when you run the online component that you start to run into some concerns. So there are two different types of major gaming structures out there for video games. And I am not a video game expert by any stretch of the imagination. I stopped advancing with video games somewhere around the PlayStation 2. I like them just as much as the next person. I don't have a whole lot of time to play them, but I have a decent understanding of how these things work. And one of the types is something that you see a lot, and something that a lot of people think that Zwift actually falls into the category of, and that is an MMORPG, or that is a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. And what that is it collects a group of people that play together in a world online. And these are your World of Warcrafts, your Fortnites, other games where a number of people come together. And you'll notice on those games that people don't have to have highly capable machines, even for pretty beautiful looking games in a lot of cases. Well, why is that the case? And that is because these games are run on the cloud services, something like Amazon's AWS service, right? So up in the cloud, this program lives, and the world is built, and all this stuff is rendered out, and down at your computer with your keyboard or your controller, you're sending signals up to the server and up to the cloud service, and it's moving all of these parts, all of the people, all of the things, the outfits, and all of your profile information. It's moving it up in the world, and what's happening is now it's taking that whole construct, that cloud world, and it's broadcasting it back to your machine. So you're viewing your game. You're watching it, right? Now you can have a 4K capable graphics card, really low end, but be able to watch this game kind of like you're streaming a video on Netflix. You are watching it as it happens. It's a little bit different of a process. I'm oversimplifying this just a little bit, but it's not a huge tax on your system, because what's happening is the cloud is rendering it. They are writing the world. They are making all of the pieces. They are making the picture for you. And all you have to do is kind of download it and watch it, more or less. And that is how those MMORPGs work. Now, a lot of people think Zwift runs like this, but it doesn't. Now, the other type of game out there is something that people really consider kind of like a console game. So those serialized games like Call of Duty and Assassin's Creed, all of those things that people can buy for consoles, or they can buy them for their computer. And you'll notice that people who buy them for their computer have very highly capable rigs, because this is a different type of format, right? They have these 4-figure, maybe even 5-figure machines. They put those beautiful clear cases on there with RGB lighting so people can see this big expensive equipment in there, big cooling system, major processors, big honking GPUs or graphics units. It's because the way that the game runs is substantially different than how something like an MMORPG works. And what's happening there is that the game now lives on your computer. It doesn't live in the cloud anymore. It lives on your computer, and it's stored on your hard drive somewhere. And it stores in folders what are called assets. And these are little pockets of code that are responsible for creating what you see. There's pieces of code for things like, human faces and shirts and pants and shoes and sidewalks. And all of these things are in these little folders for the program to call up on demand. And when it does that, when you run the program of the game and you interact with the game, its menu, and move around with the controller, now the code is telling your graphics card to write and render out that image, which is a much more robust and resource-intensive process than reading it down from the cloud, right? Writing and reading, creating or consuming are two completely different processes. So now you're putting a huge demand on your graphics card, because it is creating out of basically whole cloth, out of ones and zeros, it is creating an image for you, a nice, pretty image in a lot of cases. Zwift is a game that runs like that, and you have the game stored on your computer. All the assets are stored there, and the code is telling your computer and your graphics card to write your little avatar, to write the graphical user interface, right, to all the heads-up display. All of that is written by your computer. And if you want to test that out in practice, go ahead, log into Zwift. You have to be connected to the internet to just verify your credentials and that you're still paying for it, but you can unplug your internet and you can play the game in full. Everything will work just fine as designed. It won't crash, it won't have any issues. The only difference is you don't see anybody. You're by yourself because that requires internet connection, right? So your computer is capable of writing that game. It does the whole thing. It creates that whole beautiful world around you, all from your graphics card. Now, because the graphics are older, it doesn't require that capable of a machine. But now we're adding the online component to it with Zwift. And because it's not handled in the cloud and it's all handled on your machine, now it's increasing the load on your computer. Now, think about if you have two other people on the road with you, right? It's you, subscriber friend, Tim and Bob, right? And Tim is in the UK and Bob is in Texas, right? And you're all riding on volcano together, right? And you're all going through the arch. What's happening is all of you are talking to the servers at Zwift. And Zwift is logging all that information you're sending up, really small packets of data, mind you. There's not a ton of information there. It's grabbing some minor code, booleans, strings, integers, all from your computer talking about what your name is, your profile information, height, weight, the power you're putting out, the heart rate you're putting out, all sorts of details about you. But really, if you think about it, that data doesn't take up a whole lot of space. So that's being transmitted real fast through your internet up to the server. And the server now is batching people together. And it says, hey, subscriber friend, Bob and Tim are all in the same spot. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna commingle their information. So now Bob and Tim are also sending their information up to the servers. And the servers are taking Bob and Tim's and sending it down to your computer and telling your graphics card now to render an image of Bob and Tim, full with what they're wearing, what their power is, what their stats are in terms of height and weight and output and all that stuff. You can even click on them and watch it from their perspective. So all of that information is being sent to your computer to handle. Now, where this starts to become problematic is when you start adding more and more riders. Back a couple years ago, Zwift had figured this out, that 100 riders was about the limit for most of these standard machines on the lower end of their system requirements were able to handle. But the thing there was that for most people, what would happen is if you got into like a blob of 100 riders, it would remain pretty static. There wasn't a whole lot of churn there, right? Maybe a few of them will go off the front as you kind of major way through the group, or you'd grab more on the front and some would fall off the back. And it was a pretty predictable, slow pattern, right? You're just kind of losing some, gaining some, and it was slow enough that most machines could handle that kind of churn. But now what's happening with so many people in these rides and that 100 rider limit, think about some of the starting pens for these Tour de Zwift events. I was in one the other day that was over 2,000 riders live, not registered, but live in the pen. And everybody's taking off at once. And when you're in the pen, you're fine because everybody's static. But as soon as you go, there's this huge amount of churn. We're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of avatar changes going to your machine within a matter of seconds. Real fast stuff. And what happens is that your graphics card, if it's not capable, it starts to lose its grip on what it's doing. Sometimes it just says, nope, F it, I'm just gonna dump these riders, and you won't see anybody for a few seconds, and then as soon as those stabilize, everybody will repopulate. Sometimes frame rates drop, or in a lot of cases with the lower end machines, and this happens with tablets as well, is it just says, screw it. It thinks that the hardware is in crisis. It thinks that this is going to potentially damage the machine, so it shuts down the process and it crashes out the program. And it can be really, really frustrating. But it's a limitation of your machine and not a problem with the program itself. Now, Zwift did not anticipate this level of growth, right? They were working towards thinking that this type of growth was going to come eventually. Right? A lot of us have been speculating for a long time that Zwift isn't going to be able to do much more with the code that it has now. I just talked about how old the code was. So that they were going to have to maybe write a replacement, like a Zwift 2 in the background somewhere, and just replace it when it was ready. And they were looking at some, interim upgrades over the summer where the volume usually goes down, where they can load this in there and it's low risk, where you might be talking about a few thousand riders on the world at a time. And if there is a problem, they can kind of dial it back real quick and they're not going to piss off a whole lot of people. And what happened was COVID hit. And if I guess anything positive came out of this whole pandemic, it's the fact that it got more people incited to do something good for their health and their fitness and become more committed and come on to Zwift. So we have a larger community now. That's great. It just continues to grow. It shows no sign of waning. But this huge influx of people has exacerbated this potential or this vulnerability of the program that nobody was prepared for. This isn't Zwift's fault. This isn't your fault. This is nobody's fault. This is a confluence of events that now people have to deal with. And I'm so happy to finally say that Zwift has actually taken care of it in some capacity, in a way that I didn't think they were going to be able to. I wasn't sure if the code was going to be able to handle this type of individualized scaling. So I'm super happy to see that people do not have to invest more money or turn down their settings and crank their resolution way down to be able to enjoy the game in a stable manner. So when you run that update, you can look forward to a lot more confidence and stability going forward when it comes to these big, massive events. And there's more coming. There's Tour de Zwift that's going on right now. Tour of Watopia, if you haven't participated, that's a huge one because they usually offer up double XP. Just a little bit of a spoiler alert there. I know that some of the pros, including Geraint Thomas, have some rides coming up. I mean, basically, you get kind of a conga line around some of these courses when these pros lead things, especially somebody like G. Oh my God, last time I did a G ride, it literally, I don't think that there was a break in the peloton. It just was one big loop that went around the entire, I think it was Tempest Fugit or something like that. But now you can have a little bit more confidence. Now, Zwift sometimes, all the time, has a little, stumbles out of the gate a little bit when it comes to their updates, but I'm hoping that the key tenet of this update, this scaling for lower end machines and mid-range machines, is really going to work. But be aware that what you see might be a little bit different. Be patient. I really hope that they vetted the shit out of this because it's a forced update now. It's not an option. It's not a throttling or scaling option. This is being forced on you. And the last thing I want to see is some other kind of crash that's hitting people that were kind of stumbling through at the moment because they decided to do this. I really hope that this is something that they know is going to work, that's validated. Zwift's kind of colorful reputation for updates notwithstanding. But I'm hopeful for this. I'm excited to be able to share this and not have to recommend people buy a different piece of equipment or turn their settings way down, that you can just use the machine that you have. You can follow the system requirements right on Zwift's website, and you guys can all enjoy Zwift because I want more and more people on this platform. The more people who are on the platform, the more they're going to expand on it, the more fun we can all have and have a great social environment. So, but I hope that you guys got some value out of this video. Hopefully you learned a little bit of something about how the program works and why we were having some performance issues. Maybe you'll let Zwift off the hook a little bit and some of that frustration can now go away, understanding what we had to deal with and how the increased volume really was the root cause of all of this stuff. We're not going to let Zwift off the hook for the fact that the UI still sucks, but you know, this was just something that happened and I'm so glad that they fixed it. If you did get value out of this video, I'd appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up button. It really does help the video and the channel out quite a bit. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'm going to lob up 2 more Zwift videos up here in case you guys want to check out more of my videos. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. See ya.